Hey everybody, it's Nate and Steph from EXPLORIST.life. We teach people how to build DIY campers, and this video is episode number 11 in a series of videos where we are showing you step by step from the ground up how we're upfitting our brand new Ford Transit into a DIY camper van.
This is the fourth and final video in our lizard skin mini-series. We've already sprayed the lizard skin sound control, tested the lizard skin sound control, sprayed the lizard skin ceramic insulation, and in this video we are going to put that to the test and give you some actual data with our new thermal camera.
And to kick this video off, let's talk about the thermal camera we're using, how it works, and how we're going to use it in our testing. So this is the thermal camera that we're going to be using for this test. A little tiny camera that just plugs into the bottom of a smartphone. And let's take a look at it real quick. So on here, we've got USB-C connection. I've got an Android phone, so that's for that. There is an Apple version as well. Power button on the bottom and two lenses on the front. And really, that's pretty much all there is to it. And let's get it connected to the phone right now, and I'll kind of show you how it works from there. It's going to tell us to plug this into the bottom. Okay, it's plugged in and registering. And now it is up and running. So we can see that it's picking up my hand, pretty obviously there. So let's take a look around the garage and kind of see what this camera is telling us. We can see, looking out of the garage, we can see the garage door over on this side. Then we can see the van on this side. So as far as temperature goes, we can see that the white parts up here are about 81 degrees and the dark purple parts down here are about 63 degrees. And if we can kind of match those up to what's in the actual screen, the lights are the hottest part, sitting at about 87 degrees or so. And the area around the garage door is the coldest parts. You know, it's kind of cold outside and garage doors are inherently pretty leaky. And so we're having some cold air coming through the garage doors. So that's how we're able to see what the various temperatures are of everything around the garage. And so we're going to go around the garage a little bit and look at some random things, and we can see the temperatures of those so that whenever we do our testing inside the van, it makes a little bit more sense. So just a few steps down these stairs, and I already found the first thing I wanted to show you. So garage floor, right? Nothing there, just standard old concrete. But when we look through the thermal imaging camera, we can see all these lines, kind of squiggly, right? So what that is, that's just our radiant floor heating, and we can actually see where all the tubes are in the concrete. So what radiant floor heating is we got tubes that have hot water running through them to heat up the garage space. And since we have different heat signatures that we can see through this thermal imaging camera, we can see exactly where the heat is coming from in our garage, which is really cool, and it's going to help us with this testing whenever we hop into the van here in a minute. So we are at the front door of the shop now, and it's a metal door, metal frame, so we've usually got quite a bit of like cold air coming through. And so I want to kind of show a few things about that. So on this door, we can see the purple outline of the door, which means that there's some cold air coming through, as well as down there in the corners and stuff like that. But what I really wanted to show here is with this metal door, I can put my hand on the metal door, leave it for a second or two, and then remove my hand. And you can still see exactly where my handprint was on the door just because it warmed up just a tiny, tiny bit in those 2 seconds that I had my hand on the door. So the point in this is that this thing is really, really, really sensitive so that whenever we move into the van and we start doing our testing, we can see really, really small details. So now that you know how the thermal camera works, let's go back upstairs and we're going to talk about the testing that we're actually going to do with it.
For this video, we are doing 2 tests, and here are how those tests are going to work. When we sprayed the insulation, we didn't initially spray the entire van. We sprayed 2 coats on half of the ceiling and 2 coats on the passenger sidewall, except for where we were going to be installing a window where we didn't spray anything. This gives us some good testing surfaces for the 2 tests that we did.
For the first test, we pulled the van from our 65-degree shop outside where it was 20 degrees and let the van sit for an hour. we had a time lapse set up inside the van, observing the half-coated ceiling, and then we let that time lapse run for the entire hour of testing. The goal of the first test was to see how the lizard skin resisted heat loss when exposed to cold weather.
After the first test, we let the van continue to cool down in the shade. We then pulled the van out into the sun and observed how the spot that we left uncoated for the window was affected by the sun beating down on the side of the van. The goal of this second test was to see how the lizard skin prevented heat gain when the body panels were exposed to direct sunlight. Now let's see our results.
So this is basically the first frame of the first test, right after we had pulled the van out into the cold from our 65-degree shop. Now you can see I have 2 points here. I have point 1 and point 2, and they're both registering. This one's 72, this one's 70. The front of the van is 68, so they're all pretty close. And this one's registering a little hotter because you can see my face in the side of it. So we go a few frames to the right and it gets out of the way. Okay, now we're sitting at 68 up front and 70.7 and then 70.7 on left and right side. So remember, half of the van is sprayed, so this is focusing up on the ceiling, and the passenger side of the van is what's sprayed. So this wall and the right side of the ceiling. So there's no difference left to right because it had been sitting in the garage all night, so those temperatures had equalized left to right. There's a difference up front because our garage door is kind of leaky and cold, and so there's a little bit, that's just like 1 degree or 2 degrees of difference up there on the front of the van where it was just a little colder up there by the windshield. So let's keep on scrolling to the right and see how things change. So we're scrolling to the right, and we can already see after just 3 minutes, about 4 minutes, of the colors are starting to change. Now, point 1 and point 2 is sitting at 68.0 and 68.1. So is there a difference? Yeah, but not really, not much of one. So we're going to keep going. Keep going. And so the brightness right there, that was just us turning on some lights so we could actually see. So those were just LED lights that we had outside of the van, so they shouldn't affect temperature at all. It just makes things a little brighter. So we are 4.5 minutes in. We're at 65.3, 65.1. You can definitely see where the warmer side of the van versus the colder side of the van is. This side is losing a little bit of heat because it's 20 degrees outside. But we're still in this range right down here, that's only the difference of like a degree or so, 65.1 versus 65.3 in those two spots. I think the difference is a little more noticeable down here, so I wish I had those 2 points down here, but ultimately it's still probably,
no more than a degree.
Yeah, probably not much at all. So we'll just keep scrolling. We'll scroll a little faster through this, and you can kind of see the colors changing. Now, the reason this over here is staying so warm is because this is the part of the van that was not in contact with the outside environment. All the body panels are effectively glued to the body ribs, and so there's a thermal break there. So these are actually staying nice and warm, just like they are on basically the same temperature as the inside of the garage. We're still seeing temperature change there, but not enough to really warrant anything. So as we keep going, we can kind of see that the temperatures are starting to normalize across the left and right side. And then by, let's call it like 45 minutes in, things are pretty much the same all the way across, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Pretty.
38.2 and 38.1 degree.
Yeah, 38.2, 38.1. So a little bit of difference here, but still not very much difference, right? Okay, so that was test number 1. We're going to go on to test number 2 now and share those results. And then we'll kind of circle back and kind of like share our thoughts about like what all this means to us personally here in a minute. So test number 2 was whenever we pulled the van out into the sun. So we went from a cold van to pulling the van out into the direct sunlight in the spot where we sprayed the side body panel, but we did not spray this section of this side body panel because a window is going to end up going there. Now this was within probably 2 minutes or so of actually moving the van out into the sun. So this happened really, really fast. And so right there, we're seeing temperatures of 64.2 and 55.8. So that's already nearly 10 degrees of difference from the point where we did not spray the ceramic insulation to the point where we did spray the ceramic insulation right down here.
And just to clarify there, you did spray the sound deadening on that part, correct?
Correct. There is sound deadening all over this entire panel at the same depth. So it's equal across this entire thing on the sound deadening. But the ceramic insulation, I just sprayed like probably a 3-inch section up here at the top. Most of this panel, or all of this panel, all of the bottom part of this panel, all the bottom part of this panel, all the bottom part of here, all of this here. So
Great.
that white that you're seeing there is where it's not sprayed. So as we kind of like keep scrolling through this whole test, it's kind of hard to see because it's white on yellow, but I'll try to attempt to narrate what's going on there. So we've got 78.2 there and then 90.1 there. So that's a matter of, or a difference of 12 degrees, like just shy of 12 degrees.
Yep. And is that 4 minutes into the test?
That is, yep, just shy of 4 minutes into the test.
That's quite the difference.
Yeah, so 12, so this is this body panel here is up to 90 degrees in 4 minutes. Now, interestingly enough, this thermal imaging camera, it picks up the hottest and the coldest spots on the entire screen. And so right up here, 94.9, there's a little spot that I did not spray up here. It's just kind of an awkward nook and cranny to get up into. And so I missed that. But the thermal imaging camera is like showing me that I missed that. So that was something I actually ended up going back and hitting whenever I did the other side of the van. But it's pretty cool to see that that's up to 94.9 degrees. This part right in here is at 90.1, which there's sound deadening on this. There's probably not sound deadening up there. So like maybe that had a little bit to do with that as well. So I know it's not, sound deadening isn't designed, for thermal, insulation, but I guess maybe it had a little bit to do with it. And then 78 down there. So that's a pretty big difference from 94 to 78 right there. So at 5 minutes in, this point down here is 81.6 right down here. And then this is 92.5. And so we're at
11 degrees.
11 degrees. And as we go to the 6 minute mark, that is 83.9 and 93.2. So where are you at on your quick math there? Just shy of 10 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 9 and a little bit. So the difference between there and there is is decreasing a little bit as this whole panel heats up a little bit, but there's still a big difference. And then as we kind of get to the very end of the frame, 84.9 and 93.7.
So 9 degrees.
Yeah, so 9 degrees there. And that's pretty much where we saw things not change anymore. Like the temperatures kind of like just hung out around those levels until, we let this run for another few minutes and nothing really happened with them. So I feel like this is a pretty big part of the test. And interestingly enough, the hot point that was up here, it actually moved to right there, which is kind of in between that body panel and this support rib. There's kind of a void there. And that is where the hot point kind of like moved to as this test moved on, which is 100 degrees. 100 degrees exactly. And so that's really cool. And it kind of goes to show that it's like there's definitely a spot in there that it's like really hot. And then the lizard skin sound deadening decreases it a little bit. And then the ceramic decreases it by 9 to 12 degrees pretty consistently across the board. So that's pretty much what we've got. That's the results of this. Is there anything that you saw in this test that I kind of missed or that you want me to go back to?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. So let's go ahead and get away from this this screen here, and we're going to talk about some of our just like final thoughts of this project, the product in general, how this product compared to like the sound deadening and stuff like that, and any kind of like wrap up thoughts and frequently asked questions that we got from some of the previous videos.
So first question, did it work?
I think that it worked on the cold to hot test. So whenever it went from pulling the van from the cold into the sun, I think that absolutely worked. 12 degrees of difference is a big difference. The difference between 100 degrees and 88 degrees is pretty significant.
Yeah.
Did it work on preventing heat loss when we pulled it out in the cold? Not really. Like, a degree, 2 degrees at most.
Not significant enough.
I don't think it was significant enough to say that that worked.
How big of a difference do you think that it made?
12 degrees of difference on that one specific body panel. I wish that we could have sprayed an entire van with the stuff and then had another van that was totally not sprayed. But we don't have that. So I think that the test that we did do showed enough results that it did make a difference. And there's some other tests that have been done on YouTube. Stuff as simple as like being able to put your hand up on the uncoated metal versus the coated metal. And sometimes you can't even touch the uncoated metal. So that's kind of a good test that you don't even have to have a thermal camera for. And then there's another test that I'll link to in the video description below. A guy was making a hot rod that he put the body tubs of his hot rod out in the sun, half coated with the ceramic insulation, half uncoated. And he logged the data points with a computer. Go check that video out because that one's pretty cool too. But ultimately, I think it did make a big enough difference to matter.
So what was the difference between lizard skin and spray foam insulation? Why would you have chosen one over the other?
So lizard skin only gets sprayed on 40 mils thick, which is really, really thin, just a couple millimeters thick. And spray foam is going to be, an inch thick, 2 inches thick, 3 inches thick maybe. But the thing with spray foam insulation is whenever you spray that onto a van, there's been too many times that I've seen whenever it cures, it shrinks and expands and it grabs the body panels and it warps the exterior body panels. Now, if you've got, an 85 Chevy Astro van that you got from your grandpa for $5, maybe that's a great solution for that. But if you're paying, a fair amount of money for some of these vans, it wasn't worth the risk to me personally to do that for us. And also, I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending doing the spray foam when there's a pretty big chance that it could potentially warp body panels for you guys watching. So the next point that some people brought up in our last video was condensation. So I want to hear your thoughts on if you think this is going to do good for condensation, even though that's not what this is designed for.
Yeah, it's not what it's designed for, but I definitely think that this is going to help with condensation. The fact that we were able to just get a full coverage on the metal, and there's really no exposed metal in the van anywhere. That's going to help us. That's going to help the condensation issue, and I'm really excited to see how it handles in cold weather and if we get that condensation buildup that we had problems with in our Sprinter. So several of you asked whether or not this would be our last bit of insulation or if we're adding something in addition to the lizard skin.
So we're definitely going to be adding more insulation on the top of this. This isn't made to be, the only insulation that you use. It's meant to be one step of the process. So the best way I could kind of explain it is, if you go outside, you've got the outer shell of your jacket. It's going to repel some of the wind and rain, but it's not actually going to keep you warm. You've got another layer of thinsulate or fleece or wool or something like that underneath that outer layer that's actually keeping you warm. So it's kind of the same concept. The ceramic insulation is going to drop the heat that's coming into the van by 12 degrees like we saw on the testing. And then the additional insulation, whether that's 3M thinsulate, Havelock wool, or polyiso foam, or whatever you choose to use, is going to do the rest of the job.
So what are your final thoughts on the overall process and the overall feasibility of using this product?
So I think with the sound control, it's just really labor intensive. I'm really glad that we did it so that I know, because it's something I've been wanting to try for a few years at this point. And so it's fun to be able to try something new. But ultimately it was a lot of work, and something that's peel and stick that's also going to work pretty good too. Something that both you and I could sit down and do the project, drink some beers and listen to some good music. It's there's something to be said for how much fun you have during the project. The ceramic insulation, there's not really another product that does that, not a peel and stick product that does that. And so I think that one was probably worth doing that.
Yeah.
So,
and that being said, this is really intended to be a two-step product where you do use the sound deadening first and then the ceramic insulation. So I think that if you are going to go the route of the ceramic insulation, it does make sense to do the sound deadening first rather than the peel and stick.
yeah, I think so too. And the last thing before we kind of wrap this up is in the last few videos, people were saying they're like, there's no way that this works. Ceramic insulation doesn't have like an R value, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. I'm going to leave some resources in the video description below, and 2 things you can look into. One is going to be in race cars. So race car builders have been doing ceramic coating on headers for a long time at this point. It's not a new thing. So look into race car ceramic coated headers, and also look into tinted windows. So they do ceramic coated windows, and it's for this purpose, to reduce heat gain coming into vehicles or buildings in residential structures through the windows. So I'm going to leave a few resources to some of those in the video description below, so you can kind of educate yourself even further than what we may have skipped over in this particular video.
So we've been installing, testing, filming, editing, and uploading videos about lizard skin for the better part of a month at this point. And although we are happy that we put those videos out, we are ready to move on to the next part of this build and install the windows. And that's coming up next, so stay tuned.
Now, we hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, it would be awesome if you would share it with somebody or a group who you think could use it. Leave any questions you've got or new things you learned in the comment section below. And if this video inspired you to build something, be sure to tag your projects with the Explorist Life tag on Instagram so that we can see and share your projects. Subscribe if you want to see more DIY camper building tutorials, and we will see you in the next video.